As mentioned, you need to pass the exam. So first of all, you need to know what to expect. In your exam. Here's a grid showing you what you need to achieve for each level. So if you're looking to pass the exam, then you'll need a level 4, which is anything above 48 marks or 48%, as there are a total of 100 marks available in the exam. Now, generally you need a level 4 to pass. However, your university or college course might require you to get a level 5. So do just double check and make sure you know what level you need in order to achieve your personal goals. So in the exam, there are 6 questions. And these 6 questions are worth 100 marks in total. So when you add all the marks together, we get a grade out of 100. The exam lasts 2 hours and 10 minutes, unless of course you have extra time, in which case your exam will be slightly longer. There are 5 questions that test your reading skills in the exam, and then the final question tests your writing skills. As mentioned, you need at least 48 marks or 48% for a pass. So try to be aiming for at least half of the marks here to secure a pass in the exam. And if you're looking for a higher level, then take a look at the percentages required. It's 79% for a level 9, 73 at least for a level 8, 68 for a level 7, and so on. The reading section of your exam consists of questions 1 to 5, and these are worth 60 marks in total, so 60% of your total grade. In the reading section, you'll need to look at 2 texts. One of the texts will be a piece of non-fiction writing from the 19th century, and the other will be a piece of literary non-fiction writing from the 21st century. Some of the questions will ask you about just one of the texts, and some of the questions will ask you to compare them. The writing section of your exam is worth 40 marks, or the remaining 40% of your grade. In this section, question 6, you will have 2 options to choose from. You can either write a creative description based on an image, or you can write a non-fiction text in response to a statement, such as a letter, speech, or article. Now remember, you don't have to do both of these, you only have to do one of them, so choose either the description or the non-fiction text. When taking the A-STAR exam, it's very important that you understand the assessment objectives. So what is an assessment objective or an AO? Well, AOs are simply the skills that you need to demonstrate in order to pass the exam, and there are 6 of them in total that come up on the mark schemes. So in the reading section, you're being assessed on AO 1, 2, 3 and 4, and these cover questions 1 to 5 on your exam paper. And then for question 6 of the exam paper, we're considering AO 5 and AO 6. If you meet the criteria for these AOs, then you will pass the exam. So it's really important that you learn about each AO in detail. If you learn about them, then you'll know exactly what you need to do in order to pass. AO 1 is assessed in question 1 and question 2. As question 1 is worth 4 marks and question 2 is worth 8 marks, AO 1 is worth 16 marks in total, but it's very useful for the rest of the exam. So what does AO 1 require you to do? Well, it requires you to identify and interpret explicit and implicit information and ideas. What this means is that you need to be able to read the text and try to find some information from it. So both explicit information that is very obvious and clearly stated in the text, and implicit information, which you kind of have to work out based on the text. The part there where it says interpret this information means that you need to be able to explain your ideas. So explain your ideas about what the text means. You also need to select and synthesize evidence from different texts. Now this means that you need to be using quotes from the text to support your points. So you need to make a point about the text, support that with a quote or some evidence to show which part of the text you're looking at, and to demonstrate to the examiner that you fully understood what the text means. Where it says synthesize evidence there, that means that you need to be able to get evidence from both texts in comparison questions, so in this case question 2, and you need to be able to find relevant evidence to compare those 2 texts. So AO1 is essentially about understanding the text. You'll need to be able to do that for all of the exam questions, but AO1 especially refers to questions 1 and 2. Next, let's consider AO2, which says you must explain, comment on, and analyse how writers use language and structure to achieve effects and influence readers, using relevant subject terminology to support their views. Now, AO2 is assessed in question 3, which is worth 12 marks in total. What does it mean? Well, you need to be able to pick out language techniques and structural techniques, and you need to explain how the writer is using these to create specific effects on the reader. If you don't know what language and structural techniques are, don't worry, we'll cover them in a later section of the course. Where it says relevant subject terminology, that just means that you need to use all of the special words that you'll learn in this course in order to explain how the writers are using different methods. Now for question 3, you only need to concern yourself with language techniques. However, when it mentions structure there, you'll be able to mention that in question 4 and question 5, and you'll be able to use language and structural techniques in your writing to meet AO5 in question 6. At the moment, this won't make a lot of sense, but as the course progresses and you come back to this video, everything will be much clearer. AO3 says that you must compare writers' ideas and perspectives, as well as how these are conveyed across 2 or more texts. So the theme here is comparison, and that's assessed in question 4, which is worth 16 marks. You need to think about the writer's ideas and perspectives, so their thoughts and feelings about a specific topic. Where it says how these are conveyed, that means that you need to be grabbing that part from AO2 about language and structure. So thinking about what techniques the writers are using to convey their ideas and perspectives, their thoughts and feelings. Where it says 2 or more texts, you don't need to worry about this, as you'll only see 2 texts in your exam. So you just need to compare those 2, finding similarities and differences. AO4 requires you to evaluate text critically and support this with appropriate textual references. And that's assessed in AO5, which is worth 20 marks. Now what this one means is that you need to look at a text and you will be responding to a statement. So you've got to decide whether you agree or disagree with the statement based on the text that you read. To evaluate the text critically, you need to say very clearly whether you agree or disagree, and you need to support this with appropriate textual references, meaning you've got to use evidence from the text in order to support your opinions. Note that for this question, you will also need to be referencing language and structural techniques. So, AO5. Here we've moved on from reading to writing, so you can put your text aside and you can think about using some language and structural techniques. So, communicating clearly, effectively and imaginatively, selecting and adapting tone, style and register for different forms, purposes and audiences. Now the first part of this is quite clear. You just need to be able to communicate clearly and make sure that your writing is easy to understand. To be effective and imaginative, that just means that you need to be quite creative with your writing. So try to make it interesting and engaging. Where it says adapting tone, style and register for different forms, purposes and audiences, that just means that your writing needs to be appropriate and fit for purpose. So if you choose to write a description, then your writing should be very descriptive. And if you choose the non-fiction text, take a look at the question, as it will tell you what purpose to write for, usually to argue or explain, and what audience you need to be writing for. So that will help you to decide how formal your writing needs to be. And we'll have a look at that in more detail when we come to the writing section of the course. You also need to organise information and ideas using structural and grammatical features to support coherence and cohesion of text. So this simply means that you need to use paragraphs and organise your writing in a logical order. So think about which part of your text should come first, second, third, fourth and so on. Where it says structural features, that just means any structural techniques, which we'll cover later in the course. And grammatical features we will cover as well, to do with things like the structure of your sentences and also the length of your sentences. AO5 does cover structural and language techniques, so where you're communicating imaginatively, that means you need to be using language techniques to do that. Also assessed in question 6 is AO6, which requires you to use a range of vocabulary and sentence structures for clarity, purpose and effect, with accurate spelling, punctuation and grammar. So here we're using a range of vocabulary, meaning that you've got a wide range of interesting words that you've used. In terms of sentence structures, you want some shorter sentences and some longer sentences, and you want to use these for specific reasons. So think about what effect you want to create on the reader. Do you want them to make them feel a certain way, or do you want to make them think something in particular? Accurate spelling, punctuation and grammar is also important for AO6, so make sure that you know how to spell a range of words, use a range of punctuation, and make sure that your grammar is accurate throughout. So that's a roundup of all of the different AOs. We're going to look at these individually for the rest of the course, but this is just to give you a quick overview. At the moment, these AOs might seem a little bit confusing because you haven't looked at the rest of the course and you're not quite sure what questions to expect. But here's a quick overview of what all of the AOs are, where they are assessed, and how many marks they are worth. It's really important that you understand these AOs by the end of the course, as they're exactly what the examiner is looking for you to do.